Picture this. February 17th, 1600, Rome's Campo de Fiori Square. A man stands bound to a wooden stake as kindling is piled around his feet. His name is Giordano Bruno, and he's about to be burned alive. But not for murder, not for theft, for thinking, for daring to suggest that the universe might be infinite, that God might not be sitting on a throne just beyond the stars, micromanaging every sparrow's fall. As the flames consume him, Bruno allegedly refuses to recant, refuses to kiss the crucifix offered to him. His last words, according to witnesses, are defiant. Perhaps you pronounce this sentence against me with greater fear than I receive it. 400 years earlier, such a death would have been unthinkable. Not because people were kinder, but because the very questions Bruno asked would have seemed insane. Everyone knew God existed. Everyone knew he created the world in 6 days. Everyone knew the earth sat at the center of everything, humanity the crown jewel of divine creation. These weren't beliefs, they were facts, as solid as the ground beneath your feet. The medieval world ran on certainty. The church provided answers to every question that mattered. Where did we come from? Why are we here? What happens when we die? The answers were clear, absolute, and questioning them could get you killed. But something happened between the Middle Ages and Bruno's execution. Something that would eventually shatter that crystalline certainty into 1,000 glittering pieces. A handful of thinkers began asking dangerous questions, not just about God, but about how we know anything at all. They didn't set out to kill God. Most of them were devout believers. They just wanted to understand the world better. What they unleashed instead was a crisis of certainty that we're still living with today. Let me tell you about the thinkers who accidentally destroyed the foundations of everything we thought we knew. The story really begins in 1633, 33 years after Bruno's execution, with an old man kneeling before 10 cardinals in Rome. His name is Galileo Galilei, and he's 70 years old. The Inquisition has summoned him to answer charges of heresy. His crime? Publishing a book suggesting that the Earth moves around the sun, not the other way around. Galileo, unlike Bruno, chooses life over martyrdom. He recants. He denies what his own eyes saw through his telescope. The moons orbiting Jupiter, the phases of Venus, the mountains on our supposedly perfect, smooth moon. He kneels and swears that the Earth stands still. Legend says that as he rises from his knees, he mutters under his breath, "Eppur si muove," and yet it moves. Whether he actually said it or not, those 3 words capture something profound. Because once you've looked through a telescope, once you've seen with your own eyes that the official truth is wrong, you can't unsee it. You can say the words they want to hear. You can kneel and recant and beg forgiveness. But in your mind, in that private space they can't quite reach, you know what you know. Hey everyone, before we dive deeper into this story, quick introduction. Welcome to Professor Archive, where we explore the ideas that shaped our world. If you're enjoying this journey into the birth of uncertainty, consider leaving a like and subscribing for more deep dives into history and philosophy. All right, let's continue. Galileo died under house arrest in 1642, the same year another child was born in England. His name was Isaac Newton, and he would take Galileo's revolution to its logical conclusion. But here's the twist. Newton was trying to prove God existed. Newton wasn't some atheist rebel. He was obsessed with religion, wrote more about theology than physics, studied alchemy and biblical prophecy. He saw his work as revealing God's design, the mathematical perfection of divine creation. When he published his Principia Mathematica in 1687, describing the laws of motion and universal gravitation, he thought he was showing how God set the cosmic clockwork in motion. But here's what he actually did. He showed that the universe runs on laws. Predictable, mathematical, invariable laws. Drop an apple and gravity pulls it down. Same on Earth, same on the moon, same everywhere, every time. God didn't need to intervene every time something fell. The laws handled it automatically. Newton's contemporaries saw the problem immediately. If the universe runs on its own according to fixed laws, what exactly is God doing? The philosopher Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz accused Newton of turning God into an incompetent watchmaker who had to constantly tinker with his creation to keep it running. Newton's friend Samuel Clarke fired back. The universe needs God's active presence not just at the beginning, but always. The debate raged between them through letters and treatises. Neither realized they were both losing, because once you admit the universe runs on laws on cause and effect, on predictable patterns that human reason can understand, you've opened a door you can never close. You've suggested that we don't need revelation to understand reality. We can figure it out ourselves. Enter René Descartes, the man who tried to save certainty by doubting everything. It's 1619, and a 23-year-old French soldier is stuck in a farmhouse near the Danube River during a German winter. René Descartes, still years away from fame, sits by a stove and starts thinking. Dangerous occupation? Thinking, especially when you're good at it. Descartes looked around at the chaos of his era. Protestants and Catholics were slaughtering each other in the 30 Years' War, each side absolutely certain they were right. Ancient authorities contradicted each other. Every philosopher claimed to have found truth, yet they all disagreed. How could you know anything for certain? Descartes decided to try an experiment. What if he doubted everything? Every belief, every assumption, every truth he'd been taught. His senses could deceive him. Dreams felt real while you were in them. Maybe an evil demon was tricking him, making him believe in a world that didn't exist. Maybe nothing was real. Maybe everything he thought he knew was wrong. Then he hit bedrock. Cogito ergo sum. I think therefore I am. Even if everything else was an illusion, the fact that he was thinking, doubting, questioning, proved that he existed. You can't doubt without a doubter. From this single certainty, Descartes tried to rebuild knowledge. He thought he could prove God exists through pure reason, then use God's benevolence as a guarantee that our clear and distinct ideas must be true. It was a brilliant attempt. It also completely failed. Because here's what Descartes actually did. He shifted the foundation of knowledge from divine revelation to human reason. He said, in effect, that we validate truth through thinking, through logic, through the individual mind examining reality. God became a supporting character in Descartes' system, a useful concept to shore up the argument, but not the starting point. And once you make human reason the judge of truth, you've lit a fuse. The explosion came from Scotland, of all places, in the form of a pudgy, cheerful man named David Hume. Picture David Hume in Edinburgh in 1748. He's just published An Inquiry Concerning Human Understanding, and he's about to commit philosophical murder. Not of God directly, but of something arguably more important. Causation. Here's Hume's devastating question. How do you know that causes produce effects? You drop a ball, it falls. You've seen it happen 1,000 times. But have you ever actually seen the causing? Have you observed the invisible power that connects dropping the ball to it falling? No, you've only seen sequence. The ball leaves your hand, then it falls. But after isn't the same as because. You say the sun will rise tomorrow because it always has. But that's just habit, Hume argues. Custom. We're psychologically compelled to expect patterns to continue, but we have no logical reason to believe they will. Every time you've observed the sun rising before proves nothing about tomorrow. The future might be completely different from the past. We just assume it won't be. This is philosophical dynamite, because all science rests on causation, all prediction, all certainty about how the world works, and Hume just showed that causation itself is uncertain, unprovable, something we believe out of habit rather than logic. Let me pause here for a second. Where are you watching this from? What time is it where you are? I'm always curious about the global reach of these ideas and when people engage with philosophy. Drop your location and time in the comments. And seriously, what's your profession? I'd love to know if these questions about certainty resonate differently depending on what you do for a living. Are you an engineer who deals with cause and effect every day? A teacher wrestling with how we know what we know? Let me know. Hume's bombshell terrified his contemporaries. Some tried to refute him and couldn't. Others pretended not to understand him. A few, like the German philosopher Immanuel Kant, said Hume woke them from their dogmatic slumber. Kant spent the rest of his life trying to rescue certainty from Hume's attack. Kant's solution was brilliant and strange. Maybe we can't know reality itself, only reality as it appears to us. Our minds aren't passive receivers of information. They actively shape experience, imposing categories like causation, space, and time on the raw data of sensation. Causation isn't out there in the world. It's in here, in our heads, a lens through which we must view everything. This rescued science. We can be certain about the world as we experience it, even if the thing in itself remains forever unknowable. But at what cost? Kant had essentially said, you can never know reality, only your mind's version of it. God in Kant's system becomes practically irrelevant to knowledge. We can't prove God exists through pure reason, Kant argued, destroying centuries of theological argument. God becomes a postulate of practical reason, something we assume for moral purposes, not something we know. The fortress of certainty was crumbling, and then Friedrich Nietzsche walked into the ruins with a sledgehammer. It's 1882, and Nietzsche publishes The Gay Science. Section 125 contains one of the most famous passages in philosophy, though few people understand what it actually means. A madman runs into a marketplace screaming, "God is dead! God remains dead, and we have killed him!" People always quote that line out of context. Here's what makes it chilling. Nietzsche wasn't celebrating. He was terrified, because he understood what most people missed. God wasn't just a supernatural being you prayed to on Sundays. God was the foundation of meaning, morality, truth itself. For thousands of years, when you asked, "Why shouldn't I murder?" the answer was, "Because God forbids it." When you asked, "What is good?" the answer was, "What God commands." When you asked, "What is true?" the answer was, "What God reveals." Strip God away, and you strip away the foundation of everything. The madman in Nietzsche's story asks, how could we drink up the sea? Who gave us the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? That's not triumph. That's horror at the magnitude of what's been lost. Nietzsche saw that science, that reason, that the entire Enlightenment project had made God unnecessary for explaining the world. But we hadn't yet grappled with the consequences. We were, in his metaphor, free-floating in space with no up or down, no fixed reference point. We killed God, but we're still living in his house, using his furniture, following his rules. Eventually, we'd have to face the implications. What are the implications? No objective morality, no ultimate meaning, no certainty about anything. We're cosmic accidents on a rock spinning through an indifferent universe. Everything we think matters is a story we tell ourselves. Truth itself becomes questionable. If there's no God's eye view, no objective standpoint, then all we have are perspectives. Your truth, my truth, their truth. Who's to say which is right? Nietzsche thought we could overcome this. We could create our own values, forge our own meaning, become overmen who danced in the void. Most people aren't Nietzsche. Most people confronted with ultimate uncertainty don't dance. They despair, or they grab onto new certainties even more rigid than the old ones. The 20th century proved Nietzsche's fears prescient. Remove God, and people don't become rational freethinkers. They worship race, class, nation, leader. The ideologies that killed more people than any medieval crusade were all godless. Nazism, communism, militant nationalism. Each promised certainty, final answers, a truth worth killing for. Just like the old religions, but without transcendence to soften the edges. But here's the twist. The uncertainty wasn't finished. Physics, the hardest science, was about to discover that uncertainty goes all the way down to reality's basement. Werner Heisenberg, in 1927, discovered that you cannot simultaneously know a particle's exact position and momentum. This isn't a limitation of our instruments, it's fundamental. Reality itself is probabilistic at the quantum level. Particles don't have definite properties until you measure them. Einstein hated this. God does not play dice with the universe, he insisted. To which Niels Bohr allegedly replied, "Stop telling God what to do." Einstein was still looking for certainty, for a clockwork universe that made sense. But quantum mechanics suggested reality is inherently uncertain, observer-dependent, weird beyond our intuitive grasp. The universe at its most fundamental level refuses to be pinned down. Kurt Gödel in 1931 proved that any mathematical system complex enough to include arithmetic must contain statements that are true but unprovable within that system. Mathematics itself, the realm of absolute logical certainty, has limits. There are truths we can never prove, questions we can never answer using logic alone. Even mathematics can't save us from uncertainty. So, where does this leave us? The thinkers we've met today, from Galileo to Gödel, didn't set out to destroy certainty. Most were trying to find it. But question by question, discovery by discovery, they dismantled the edifice of absolute knowledge. We live in the rubble. We've traded the comfort of divine certainty for the anxiety of permanent doubt. We've gained incredible power, science, technology, medicine that would seem like magic to medieval peasants. We've lost something too. The bone-deep assurance that the universe makes sense, that we matter, that someone's in charge. Is that progress? Depends on the day you ask me. Some people respond by retreating to fundamentalism, grabbing onto old certainties with white knuckles. Some embrace relativism, claiming all truth is subjective. Some try to rebuild on new foundations, science, reason, humanism. Some just cope, day to day, living with uncertainty like background radiation. The question isn't whether we can get certainty back. We can't. The questions that were asked can't be unasked. The knowledge we've gained can't be forgotten. The question is whether we can learn to live without certainty, whether we can build meaning in a universe that doesn't come with instructions, whether we can be good without God telling us to, seek truth without absolute foundations, love and create and dream, knowing it all ends in oblivion. Giordano Bruno, burning in that Roman square, believed in an infinite universe full of worlds beyond counting. He died for that idea, not because it was proven, because he couldn't unsee it once he'd imagined it. That's the human condition after these thinkers finish their work. We can't unsee what we've seen. We can't unknow what we know. We're condemned to uncertainty, to piecing together provisional truths, to building meaning without foundations. Maybe that's what makes us most human. Not certainty, but the courage to keep seeking truth, knowing we might never find it. Not faith in God, but faith that the search itself matters. Not absolute answers, but better questions. The thinkers who killed certainty gave us something more valuable: responsibility. We can't blame God for evil or credit him for good. We can't cite divine revelation to win arguments. We have to figure it out ourselves, together, through reason and evidence and endless difficult conversation. It's harder, it's scarier, but it's also more honest. We live in a universe that doesn't owe us comfort or meaning or explanation. But we're the universe examining itself, questioning itself, trying to understand itself. That's either cosmically absurd or cosmically profound, maybe both. The age of certainty is dead. Long live the age of questions. If you've made it this far, thank you for taking this journey through the ideas that shattered the medieval worldview. If this resonated with you, if it made you think or question or see the world differently, consider supporting the channel with a super thanks. It helps me keep creating these deep dives into the ideas that matter. Hit that subscribe button for more explorations into philosophy, history, and the questions that haunt us. And remember, uncertainty isn't the enemy. Pretending we're certain when we're not is. This is Professor Archive, reminding you that the examined life is still worth living, even when the answers are uncertain. See you in the next one.